The charity gala was everything Mira hated about the city's elite. Crystal chandeliers dripping light like frozen tears, women in gowns that cost more than her annual tuition, men in tuxedos laughing too loud, drinking too much, pretending to care about the orphanage their checks would allegedly support. The ballroom of the Castellano Grand Hotel glittered with wealth and indifference, and Mira moved through it like a ghost in a borrowed black dress, her tray of champagne flutes balanced on aching fingers. 18 months of night shifts, 18 months of smiling at people who looked through her like glass, 18 months of saving every tip, every penny, to finish her degree in deaf education, to become the teacher she'd needed as a child, the one who might have made her little brother's short life less lonely. Tommy had been gone for 6 years now. The ache had dulled to something she could carry, most days. But nights like this, surrounded by people who'd never known real loss, it pressed against her chest like a stone. Table 12 needs a refresh. Her manager's voice crackled through the earpiece. And for God's sake, smile. These people are paying your salary. Mira smiled. It didn't reach her eyes, but no one was looking at her eyes. She was weaving through the crowd when she saw the boy. He stood near the edge of the dance floor, small and rigid, maybe 8 or 9 years old. Dark curly hair. A miniature tuxedo that should have made him look adorable but instead made him look like a doll. Positioned, perfect, empty. His hands were moving in sharp, frustrated gestures that Mira recognized instantly. Sign language. She stopped walking, watched as the boy tugged at the sleeve of the man beside him, a mountain in a designer suit, his back turned, deep in conversation with 3 other men who radiated the same quiet menace. The boy tugged again, more insistent, his hands flying through signs that were desperate and urgent. Bad man. Saw him. Gun. Bad man is here. Mira's blood ran cold. The man in the suit, tall, dark-haired, with shoulders that blocked out the light, didn't turn, didn't respond. Either he didn't feel the tugging or he was ignoring it. The boy's face crumpled with frustration, his signs becoming more frantic. Please, listen. Danger, danger. No one was listening. No one could understand. Mira set down her tray and moved without thinking. She crossed the ballroom floor, dodging dancers and donors, her heart hammering against her ribs. The boy saw her coming. His eyes went wide, confusion first, then a flicker of desperate hope as he watched her hands rise. I see you, she signed. I understand. Tell me. The relief on his face nearly broke her. His hands steadied, became clearer now that someone was actually paying attention. Man in gray suit. By the kitchen. He has a gun under his jacket. I saw it when he reached for a glass. He keeps watching Uncle Nico. He's going to hurt him. Mira's gaze swept the room. There, near the service entrance. A man in a gray suit, unremarkable except for the tension in his shoulders, the way his hand kept drifting to his left side, the way his eyes tracked something, someone, with predatory focus. She turned to the boy. Stay here. Don't move. Then she did something incredibly stupid. She tapped the mountain on the arm. He turned, and Mira forgot how to breathe. She'd seen powerful men before, had served them champagne and watched them hold court at tables that cost more than her rent. But this was different. This man didn't just have power. He was power, condensed into human form. A face like a Renaissance painting, all sharp cheekbones and a jaw that could cut glass. Eyes so dark they seemed to swallow light. A presence that made the air around him feel heavier, charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. Those eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her want to run. What? The word was a blade. Your nephew. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. He's been trying to tell you something. There's a man by the kitchen in a gray suit. He has a gun. The transformation was instantaneous. The cold irritation vanished, replaced by something far more dangerous. His gaze snapped to the boy, then to Mira, then across the room toward the kitchen entrance. "How do you know what he said?" "I sign." She didn't have time to explain further. "He says the man has been watching you. He thinks—" The man in the gray suit moved. Everything happened at once. The mountain, Uncle Nico, shoved Mira behind him with one arm while his other hand reached inside his jacket. The boy grabbed Mira's hand, his small fingers crushing hers. Men materialized from the crowd, surrounding them in a protective formation she hadn't seen coming. And then, shouting. A scuffle near the kitchen. The sharp crack of something that might have been a gunshot muffled by a silencer, or might have been a champagne cork, or might have been her own heart exploding in her chest. It was over in seconds. The man in the gray suit was on the ground, pinned by two men in black. The crowd hadn't even noticed. The orchestra kept playing, the dancers kept dancing, the wealthy kept being wealthy. A different world, operating by different rules. The mountain turned to face her. Up close, he was even more overwhelming, taller than she'd realized, broader, radiating heat and danger in equal measure. But his eyes, when they met hers, held something unexpected. Gratitude. "You saved my life." His voice was quieter now, still rough, still commanding, but with an undercurrent of something raw. "And my nephew's." "He saved your life." Mira's hand was still trapped in the boy's grip. "I just translated." The man looked down at the child. Something shifted in his expression. Guilt, maybe. Pain. He crouched to the boy's level, his movements careful, uncertain. "Leo." He said the name like an apology. The boy's free hand moved. "You never listen. No one ever listens." Mira translated before she could stop herself. The man flinched like he'd been struck. "I don't—" He stopped, looked up at Mira with those devastating dark eyes. "I don't know how to talk to him. His mother, she was the one who—" Another stop. Another breath. "She's gone. And I've been trying to learn. But it's not enough. It's never enough." The vulnerability in his voice cracked something open in Mira's chest. This wasn't just a powerful man with a deaf nephew. This was a man drowning in grief and guilt, desperate to reach a child he loved but couldn't communicate with. She knew that feeling, had lived it, once, from the other side. "What's your name?" the man asked. "Mira. Mira Santos." "Nico Andretti." He rose to his full height, still holding her gaze. "I owe you a debt, Mira Santos. I don't forget debts." "You don't owe me anything. You understood my nephew when no one else could. You saw a threat and you warned me instead of running." His jaw tightened. "In my world, that's rare. That's valuable." He reached into his jacket, she tensed, and pulled out a card. Thick paper. A name. A number. Nothing else. "If you ever need anything," he said, "call." Mira took the card because refusing seemed more dangerous than accepting. "I should get back to work." "No." The word was final. "You're done working tonight. My men will make sure you get home safely." "Mr. Andretti." "Nico." He was looking at Leo now, at the boy still clutching Mira's hand like a lifeline. "And this isn't a request. It's—" He paused, and something flickered in his expression. "It's the beginning." "The beginning of what?" He didn't answer, just looked at her with those impossible eyes, dark as the space between stars, holding secrets she couldn't begin to fathom. Then he turned to Leo and, slowly, clumsily, signed 2 words. "Thank you." The boy's face lit up. It was like watching the sun break through storm clouds. Sudden, radiant, transformative. He released Mira's hand and threw his arms around his uncle's neck, holding on tight. Nico Andretti, who looked like he could crush stone with his bare hands, held the boy like he was made of glass. And Mira, standing in a ballroom full of strangers, felt the foundations of her careful, controlled life begin to shift beneath her feet. She should walk away. Should forget the card in her pocket and the boy's hopeful face, and the way Nico Andretti had looked at her like she was something more than invisible. But some doors, once opened, can never be closed. And Mira had just stepped through one. 3 days later, Nico Andretti walked into the coffee shop where Mira worked her morning shifts. She saw him through the steam of the espresso machine, impossible to miss, even in casual clothes. Dark jeans, a charcoal sweater that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe, sunglasses pushed up into hair that looked deliberately disheveled. He moved through the cramped space like he owned it, and given what she'd learned about him in the past 72 hours of anxious internet searching, he probably could if he wanted to. Nico Andretti, head of the Andretti family, one of the most powerful men in the city, according to articles that danced around words like organized crime and alleged connections and legitimate business empire. The kind of man that waitresses didn't talk to. The kind of man that waitresses ran from. He sat at the counter, directly in front of her station. "Black coffee," he said, "and whatever you recommend for breakfast." Mira's hands were steady as she poured. She'd had 3 days to process. 3 days to convince herself that the gala had been a fever dream, that the card in her jewelry box meant nothing, that her life would continue on its normal, predictable path. So much for that. "How did you find me?" She set the coffee in front of him, her voice low enough that the other customers couldn't hear. "I know everything about you, Mira Santos." He said it without arrogance, just fact. 24 years old, double major in deaf education and child psychology at City University. 3 jobs, catering, this coffee shop, and weekend tutoring for deaf children at the community center. You grew up in foster care after your parents died when you were 6. You had a younger brother, Thomas, who was deaf from birth. He died when you were 18. His dark eyes met hers, and she saw no cruelty there, only a strange kind of recognition. You've been fighting your whole life. For him. For yourself. For every kid who reminds you of what you lost. Mira's throat tightened. That's a hell of an invasion of privacy. I protect what matters to me. To do that, I need to understand it. I'm not yours to protect. Not yet. He took a sip of coffee, watching her over the rim. Leo hasn't stopped talking about you. Signing about you. 3 days, and you're all he thinks about. The woman who understood him. The woman who listened. Something cracked in her chest. She thought of the boy's face. That desperate hope when he'd realized she could see his words. That radiant joy when his uncle had signed those 2 clumsy words. "He's a good kid," she said quietly. "He just needs someone who speaks his language." "That's why I'm here." Nico set down his cup. "I want to hire you." "I already have 3 jobs. Quit them." He said it like it was simple, like money was oxygen, abundant and free. "I'll pay you triple whatever you're making combined. You'll live at my estate, have access to whatever resources you need, and your only job will be Leo. Teaching him. Teaching me." His jaw tightened. "I need to learn to talk to my nephew, Miss Santos. I need someone to help me reach him before I lose him completely." Mira stared at him. The offer was insane. Life-changing. The kind of thing that happened to other people. People in movies. People who didn't scrub espresso machines at 6 in the morning. Why me? You could hire anyone. The best specialists in the country. I did. 3 of them over the past year. They lasted 2 months, 6 weeks, and 11 days respectively. Something dark moved behind his eyes. Leo didn't connect with them. He went through the motions, learned what he had to, and shut down the moment they left the room. But with you, he paused. I watched the security footage from the gala 100 times, maybe more. The moment you started signing, he changed. He came alive. That was one conversation. It only takes one. Nico leaned forward and Mira caught the scent of him, cedar and something darker, smoke or leather or danger. I'm not asking you to fix him. I'm asking you to see him, the way you did that night, the way no one else has since his mother died. His mother? Your sister? My twin. The word landed heavy, weighted with grief. She was the only one who could reach him. When she died, he stopped talking entirely, even in sign, even to me. His voice roughened. I've spent 8 months watching my nephew disappear into himself, and I don't know how to stop it. I don't know how to save him. Mira thought of Tommy, the way he'd retreated after their parents died, curling into himself like a wounded animal. She'd been 12, too young to help, too young to understand. By the time she'd learned enough sign to really communicate with him, the illness had already taken hold. She'd failed her brother. She couldn't fail this boy, too. I have conditions, she heard herself say. Nico's eyes flickered. Name them. I finish my degree. Whatever schedule Leo needs, I work my classes around it. Done. I'll pay your remaining tuition. I'm not. It's not charity, it's investment. A better educated teacher makes for better results. His tone brooked no argument. What else? I'm not part of your world. Whatever you do, whoever you are outside that estate, I don't want to know. I don't want to be involved. A long pause. Something shifted in his expression. Amusement, maybe, or respect. I can't promise you won't see things, he said slowly, but I can promise they'll never touch you. You'll be protected, Mira. You and everyone you care about. I don't have anyone. Then you'll be protected anyway. He held her gaze, and she saw something there she hadn't expected. Loneliness. The same bone-deep isolation she saw in her own mirror every morning. We're more alike than you think. Mira should have argued. Should have told him that she was nothing like a crime boss with a private army and more money than God. But the words wouldn't come, because some part of her recognized the truth in what he'd said. They were both survivors, both defined by loss, both desperately trying to save something they loved. 1 month, she said. A trial period. If it's not working, for Leo, for me, I walk away. No strings. Agreed. And you learn sign. Really learn it. Not just thank you and I love you, full conversations. You put in the work, or this is pointless. Nico's mouth curved. Not quite a smile, but close. You're not afraid of me at all, are you? I'm terrified of you. Mira met his eyes without flinching. But Leo needs someone who won't let terror get in the way. So here I am. He extended his hand across the counter. His palm was warm, his grip firm, his fingers rough with calluses that didn't match his expensive clothes. Welcome to the family, Miss Santos. Mira. If she was going to live in his house, he could use her name. And this isn't family. This is a job. That almost smile again. We'll see. He left money on the counter, far too much for a black coffee, and walked out without looking back. Mira watched him go, the card he'd given her suddenly burning in her memory. She'd just agreed to move into the home of the city's most dangerous man, to teach his grieving nephew, to somehow bridge the silence between them. She was either the bravest person she knew or the most foolish. Probably both. The Andretti estate was a fortress wrapped in beauty. Mira arrived on a Sunday morning, her entire life packed into 2 suitcases that looked pathetic in the marble foyer. The house sprawled across manicured grounds like something out of a European fairy tale, stone walls softened by climbing ivy, arched windows that caught the morning light, gardens that seemed to stretch forever. Her room alone was larger than her old apartment, with a 4-poster bed and a private bathroom, and a view of rolling hills that made her chest ache with something she couldn't name. She didn't belong here. Every polished surface reminded her of that. But then Leo appeared in her doorway, his dark eyes uncertain, his hands moving in careful signs. "You came. I didn't think you would. I promised." She signed back. "I keep my promises." The smile that broke across his face was worth every moment of doubt. He grabbed her hand and pulled her through the house, showing her his favorite hiding spots: the kitchen where the cook snuck him cookies, the library with books in a dozen languages he couldn't hear but loved anyway. His signs came faster as his excitement grew, words tumbling over each other in a rush of enthusiasm she suspected no one had witnessed in months. By the time they reached the gardens, Mira understood 2 things. Leo was brilliant, curious, and desperately lonely, and she was already in far deeper than she'd planned. The first week established a rhythm. Mornings with Leo, lessons that looked like play, sign language woven into everything from breakfast to walks through the garden. Afternoons were for her classes, attended via video while Leo napped or worked with his tutor on reading. Evenings belonged to Nico. She hadn't expected that, had assumed he'd be absent, consumed by whatever dark business kept him out until midnight and brought him home with shadows under his eyes. But every night at 7, without fail, he appeared in the study where she and Leo spent their final hours together. And he learned, clumsily at first. His large hands were made for violence, not the delicate gestures of sign language, and he fumbled more than he succeeded. But he never quit, never made excuses. Sat beside his nephew with a focus that bordered on ferocious, copying the movements Mira demonstrated, trying again and again until his fingers remembered what his mind had grasped. "Your uncle's getting better," Mira signed to Leo one evening, 3 weeks into her stay. Leo's eyes drifted to Nico, who was practicing the alphabet with the determination of a soldier learning battlefield maneuvers. "He's trying. He never tried before. Maybe he didn't know how. Maybe." Leo's hands hesitated. "I was angry at him. After Mom died. He couldn't talk to me, so I stopped talking to everyone. I wanted him to feel what I felt." His small face crumpled. That was mean. Mira's heart clenched. She pulled Leo close, letting him bury his face against her shoulder the way Tommy used to when the world became too much. "Grief makes us do things we regret," she signed when he finally pulled back. "The important thing is what happens next. You're talking now. He's learning now. That matters more than the silence before." Nico watched them from across the room. Mira felt his gaze like a physical touch, warm and weighted. When she met his eyes, something passed between them. Gratitude, yes, but something else too. Something that made her pulse quicken and her cheeks flush. She looked away first. Had to, because whatever was building between them, she couldn't afford to name it. The 4th week brought a shift in the household. Men came and went at odd hours. Nico disappeared for 2 days without explanation, returning with a bruise on his jaw and a coldness in his eyes she hadn't seen since the gala. Leo noticed the change before Mira did. His uncle's distraction, the way guards multiplied at the gates, the hushed conversations that stopped when she entered rooms. "What's happening?" she finally asked, finding Nico in his study past midnight. She couldn't sleep. Hadn't been able to since she'd noticed the guns the guards now carried openly. Nico looked up from whatever documents consumed him. In the lamp's low light, the exhaustion carved into his face was stark. He looked older, worn down. human in a way that made her want to smooth the furrow between his brows. You said you didn't want to know. That was before armed men started patrolling the gardens where Leo plays. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood, crossed to the window, and spoke to the darkness beyond the glass. The man at the gala? The one who tried to kill me. He was sent by Victor Russo, an old enemy. His family and mine have been at war for 3 generations. His jaw tightened. When Leo stopped him, when you warned me, we captured him alive. He talked eventually. Told us things Russo didn't want revealed. Now Russo knows we have information that could destroy him. What does that mean for Leo? For the people in this house? It means the estate is a target. Nico turned to face her, and the rawness in his expression stole her breath. I've increased security, brought in men I trust with my life. But I need you to understand the risk you're in by staying here. Are you asking me to leave? I'm giving you the choice. His voice roughened. I should have given it to you weeks ago, before. He stopped, his hands clenched at his sides. Before what? Before you became something I couldn't bear to lose. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning neither of them was ready to unpack. Mira's heart hammered against her ribs. She should leave, should take the escape he was offering and run back to her safe, small, lonely life. Instead, she took a step toward him, then another. Leo needs me, she said quietly. He's finally opening up, finally healing. If I leave now, everything we've built. I'm not talking about Leo. Nico's voice was barely a whisper. I'm talking about me. His hand rose, trembling slightly, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. The touch was electric, gentle in a way that seemed impossible for a man who'd built an empire on violence. His fingers traced her cheekbone, her jaw, the curve of her lower lip. Mira. Her name in his mouth sounded like a prayer. She should pull away, should remember the rules she'd set, the boundaries she'd drawn. But his eyes held hers, dark and desperate and devastatingly honest, and she couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The kiss, when it came, was soft, a question more than a statement. His lips brushed hers once, twice, giving her every chance to retreat. When she didn't, when she rose on her toes and pressed closer, her fingers curling into the fabric of his shirt, the question became an answer. He kissed her like she was precious, like she was something worth protecting, worth wanting, worth burning for. His arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her against him, and Mira felt the walls she'd built over a lifetime of loss begin to crumble. They broke apart at the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Nico released her immediately, putting distance between them, his face a mask again by the time the guard appeared in the doorway. Sir, we have a situation at the east gate. Nico nodded once, already moving. At the door he paused, looked back at her with eyes that held everything he couldn't say. Stay, he said. Please. Then he was gone, and Mira was alone with the ghost of his touch on her lips and the terrible, wonderful realization that she'd already made her choice. She wasn't leaving. Not because of Leo, though she loved the boy fiercely. Not because of the mission she'd agreed to, though she believed in it more than ever. She was staying because somewhere between the sign language lessons and the midnight conversations, and the way Nico looked at her like she'd hung the stars, she'd fallen in love with a man she had no business loving, and she was beginning to suspect he'd fallen too. The next morning she woke to screaming. Leo's screaming, high and wordless and terrified, the sound of a child in nightmare. Mira was out of bed and running before her mind caught up with her body, bare feet slapping marble as she raced toward his room. She found him sitting up in bed, tears streaming down his face, his hands signing frantically at shadows she couldn't see. They took him. They took Uncle Nico. I saw it. I saw it. Leo. She gathered him into her arms, her heart pounding. Leo, it was just a dream. Your uncle is... The door burst open. One of the guards, Marco, she'd learned his name, stood in the entrance, his face ashen. Miss Santos, you need to come with me. Now. What's happening? Marco's eyes flickered to Leo, then back to her. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. Mr. Andretti is gone. His car was ambushed 2 hours ago. He swallowed. Russo's men have him. Leo's hands went still. His eyes, fixed on Marco's face, showed understanding that no 8-year-old should possess. And Mira, holding a trembling child who'd just lost his mother and might now lose the only family he had left, felt the world crack open beneath her feet. The next 12 hours were a waking nightmare. The estate transformed into a war room. Men Mira had never seen filled the halls, their voices low and urgent, maps spread across every surface. She caught fragments: warehouse district, Russo's compound, extraction team. But most of it blurred into white noise beneath the roar of her own fear. Leo wouldn't leave her side. He clung to her hand through the chaos, his eyes tracking every movement, his body rigid with attention no child should know. She kept signing to him, reassurances she wasn't sure she believed, promises she had no power to keep, because silence felt like surrender. They'll find him, she told him. Your uncle is strong, the strongest person I've ever met. Mom was strong too. Leo's hands moved slowly, heavy with grief. She still died. Mira had no answer for that. Some truths were too brutal for comfort. By evening, a plan had formed. Marco briefed her in the kitchen, away from Leo's watchful eyes, his voice grim. Russo's holding him at an old meatpacking plant near the docks. We've confirmed his location, but the building is heavily guarded. A direct assault would get him killed before we breached the perimeter. So what's the plan? Marco hesitated. Russo's made a demand. He wants the information we extracted from his man at the gala. Files that could bring down his entire operation. He's proposing an exchange. Then give him the files. It's not that simple. The moment he has what he wants, he'll kill Mr. Andretti anyway. We need a distraction. Something that gets our people inside while Russo thinks he's in control. Mira's blood ran cold. She saw where this was going before Marco said the words. He knows about you, Marco continued. Russo. He knows Mr. Andretti has feelings for you. His men have been watching the estate for weeks. If we offer you as part of the exchange. Absolutely not. The voice came from behind them. Leo stood in the doorway, his small face fierce, his hands already moving. Mira translated automatically, her heart clenching at the fury in his signs. You're not using her as bait. She's not a piece to trade. Uncle Nico would never allow it. Leo, Marco started. No. The sign was sharp, emphatic. Find another way. Mira knelt beside him, taking his hands in hers. Leo, look at me. His eyes met hers, shimmering with tears he refused to let fall. Your uncle saved my life at that gala. He gave me a home. He gave me you. Her voice cracked, but she pushed through. If there's a chance, any chance, that I can help bring him back, I have to take it. You could die. I could. She wouldn't lie to him, not about this. But I'd rather die trying to save someone I love than live knowing I didn't try. Leo stared at her. Something shifted in his expression. Understanding, maybe. The terrible wisdom of a child who'd already learned that love and loss were two sides of the same coin. You love him, he signed. Yes. The word came easily, naturally, like it had been waiting inside her all along. I love him. Then bring him home. Leo's hands steadied. Bring him home to us. The plan was simple in theory. terrifying in execution. Mira would accompany Marco to the exchange point, presented as additional leverage, proof of Nico's vulnerability, his attachment to things that could be taken away. While Russo focused on her and the files, a second team would breach from the rear, creating chaos that would allow a third team to extract Nico. Simple, except for the 100 ways it could go wrong. The meatpacking plant loomed against the night sky like a rotting corpse, its broken windows like empty eye sockets staring down at them. Mira's hands wouldn't stop shaking. She clasped them in her lap as the car rolled to a stop, breathing through the fear that threatened to choke her. "You can do this," she told herself. "For Leo. For Nico. For the family you never thought you'd have." Marco handed her an earpiece, small enough to be hidden by her hair. "You'll hear everything. When the team is in position, I'll say the word checkmate. That's your signal to get down and stay down. Understand?" Mira nodded. Her voice had abandoned her somewhere between the estate and this graveyard of rust and shadow. They walked her inside like a prisoner. Two of Russo's men flanked her, their grips bruising on her arms, while Marco followed with a briefcase containing the files. The interior was worse than the exterior. Dark, dripping, smelling of old blood and older decay. Mira swallowed bile and kept walking. The main floor had been cleared into a makeshift arena. Floodlights cast harsh circles of illumination, leaving the edges in shadow. And there, in the center, bound to a chair with blood on his face and defiance in his eyes, Nico. Their gazes locked across the distance. She saw the moment he recognized her. The flash of rage, then fear, then something that looked like despair. "No." His voice was wrecked, hoarse from screaming or silence. She couldn't tell which. "No, you shouldn't be here. Marco, what the hell?" "Ah, the guest of honor." Victor Russo emerged from the shadows, and Mira understood immediately why Nico considered him dangerous. He was older, silver-haired, with the distinguished appearance of a senator or CEO, but his eyes were empty, dead. The eyes of a man who'd long ago stopped seeing other humans as anything but obstacles or tools. "Miss Santos, I presume." Russo circled her like a predator examining prey. "I've heard so much about you. The woman who tamed the great Nico Andretti, who made him soft." He smiled, and it was the coldest thing Mira had ever seen. "Soft men make mistakes. Let him go." Her voice came out stronger than she felt. "You have me. You have the files. Take what you want and end this." "Oh, I intend to take everything." Russo gestured, and one of his men opened the briefcase, rifling through the documents inside. "But ending this? No, I don't think so. You see, Andretti's father killed my brother 30 years ago. His grandfather killed my father before that. This war is older than both of us." He turned to look at Nico, and his smile widened. "I'm going to kill him slowly, and I'm going to make you watch. Touch her, and I'll tear out your throat with my teeth." Nico's voice was barely human, a snarl of pure animal rage. He strained against his bonds, muscles cording, blood dripping from his wrists where the ropes cut into flesh. "She has nothing to do with this. She's innocent." "No one who loves you is innocent." Russo pulled a gun from his jacket. Elegant, silver-plated, an extension of his dead-eyed menace. "That's the first lesson of this life, Andretti. Everyone you love becomes a weapon someone can use against you." He raised the gun toward Mira. Time slowed. She saw Nico's face, the horror, the helplessness, the love he'd never fully spoken. She heard Marco's voice in her earpiece, calm and clear. "Checkmate." Mira dropped. The world exploded into chaos. Gunfire erupted from every direction, the second team breaching, the third moving toward Nico. Russo's men scattered, returning fire, shouting orders that were swallowed by the cacophony. Mira pressed herself flat against the filthy concrete, covering her head, praying to whatever god might listen. A body fell beside her. One of Russo's men, his eyes empty in a different way now. She fought down the scream building in her throat and crawled, toward Nico, toward the chair, toward the man she loved. Someone was already there. Marco, cutting through Nico's bonds with a knife, his movements quick and efficient. The moment Nico's hands were free, he surged to his feet, grabbed a gun from a fallen enemy, and became something Mira had never seen. A killer. He moved through the chaos like death incarnate, every shot precise, every movement lethal. Men fell before him, Russo's soldiers one after another, their bodies crumpling as Nico advanced. There was no hesitation in him, no mercy. Only the cold, ruthless efficiency of a predator protecting what was his. Mira should have been horrified, should have recoiled from this proof of what he truly was. Instead, she understood. This violence wasn't cruelty. It was love. Savage, desperate, willing to burn the world to keep her safe. Russo tried to run, made it 3 steps before Nico's hand closed around his collar, spinning him, slamming him against a pillar with enough force to crack bone. You threatened her. Nico's voice was ice. You pointed a gun at her. Andretti. Russo's composure had shattered, his dead eyes finally showing something human. Fear. We can negotiate. The files, the territory. I'll give you whatever you want. I want my family safe. Nico pressed the gun under Russo's chin. That's all I've ever wanted. Nico. Mira's voice cut through the darkness. She was on her feet now, bruised but whole, standing in the wreckage of a war she'd never asked to join. Don't. Not like this. He turned his head, looked at her with eyes that held 20 years of violence and 1 month of something tender and new. He'll never stop. If I let him live, he'll come for you. For Leo. For everyone I love. Then let someone else end it. She stepped closer, her hand reaching for him. Don't let this be the last thing I see when I look at you. Please. Something cracked in his expression. The ice melted just for a moment, revealing the man beneath the monster. He stepped back, lowered the gun. Marco, he said quietly. Handle it. Then he turned away from Victor Russo, from 30 years of war, from the rage that had defined his entire life, and walked toward Mira. His hands, still bloody, cupped her face with a gentleness that made her weep. You came for me, he whispered. You foolish, brave, impossible woman. You came for me. I love you. The words spilled out, desperate and true. I love you, and I couldn't let you die thinking I was too afraid to say it. I love you too. He kissed her, hard, claiming, alive. I have loved you since the moment you looked at my nephew and saw a person instead of a problem. Since you looked at me and saw something worth saving. Behind them, a single gunshot. Mira flinched, but Nico held her steady. It's over, he said. It's finally over. She buried her face in his chest, blood and sweat, and the heartbeat she'd almost lost, and believed him. 4 months later, Mira stood in the garden and watched Nico sign a story to Leo. The afternoon light was golden, spilling through the trees like honey, catching the silver at Nico's temples and the smile on Leo's face. They sat on a bench by the fountain, uncle and nephew, their hands moving in animated conversation, their laughter carrying across the manicured lawn. Nico's signs had become fluid now, natural, not perfect. He still stumbled over complex phrases, still paused to remember words he'd learned just last week. But real. A bridge between 2 people who'd spent too long stranded on opposite shores. Leo was telling a joke. Something about a frog and a restaurant that Mira had taught him last Tuesday. Delighted by its absurdity, she watched Nico's face transform as he caught the punchline, genuine surprise, then a bark of laughter that echoed off the stone walls. "That's terrible," he signed, still laughing. "Where did you learn that?" Leo pointed at Mira, his grin impish. "She's a bad influence." "The worst," Nico agreed. His eyes found hers across the garden, warm with something that still made her breath catch after all these months. "But we're keeping her anyway." The Russo threat had dissolved like morning fog. Without Victor, the family had splintered. Some absorbed into Andretti territory, others scattered to distant cities where old grudges couldn't follow. The files that had nearly cost Nico his life now gathered dust in a safe, insurance against a war that no longer needed fighting. Peace. Mira was still learning what that word meant in this world of shadows and secrets. But she was learning. Slowly. Surely. With Nico beside her and Leo between them, she was building something she'd never thought she'd have. A family. She'd finished her degree in June, walking across the stage to collect her diploma while Nico and Leo cheered from the front row. Leo had made her a card, hand-drawn, covered in glitter, signed with the careful letters he was finally learning to write. "Best teacher ever," it said. "Best mom, too." She'd cried for an hour. Nico had held her through all of it, never asking her to explain, understanding without words what that single phrase meant to a woman who'd lost everyone she'd ever loved. Now she worked from the estate, consulting for families with deaf children, building the practice she'd dreamed of since Tommy died. Nico had converted the East Wing into offices, insisted on it, despite her protests about the expense. "You gave me my nephew back," he'd said. "Let me give you this." She'd stopped arguing about money months ago, stopped seeing his generosity as charity and started seeing it for what it was: love, expressed in the only language he'd known before she taught him another. The sun was setting by the time Leo finally tired himself out. Nico carried him inside, the boy draped over his shoulder like a sleepy koala, his face peaceful in a way it never would have been a year ago. Mira followed, her heart so full it ached. She was tucking Leo into bed when he caught her hand. "Stay," he signed. "Tell me about Tommy." She'd told him before, many times, but he never tired of hearing about her brother, the boy who couldn't hear but loved to feel music through vibrations in the floor, who'd made her laugh with terrible jokes, who'd died too young but lived fiercely while he was here. "Tommy would have loved you," she signed, settling onto the edge of his bed. "You remind me of him sometimes, the way you see things other people miss." "Like the man at the gala?" "Exactly like that." She smoothed the hair from his forehead. "You saved your uncle's life that night, Leo, because you paid attention when no one else did. You saved him too." His eyes were heavy, sleep pulling at him. "You saw me when no one else could. You made Uncle Nico see me too." Mira blinked back tears. "We saved each other. That's what family does." Leo smiled, soft, content, already half dreaming. "I'm glad you're my family." "Me too, sweetheart." "Me too." She kissed his forehead and slipped from the room, leaving the door cracked the way he liked, the nightlight glowing soft against the darkness. Nico was waiting in the hallway. He looked different in the half-light. Softer, younger. The hard edges of his public face dissolved into something private and tender. He reached for her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers, and led her through the quiet house without a word. The terrace overlooked the gardens, the fountain silver in the moonlight, the stars emerging one by one in a sky washed clean by the setting sun. A table had been set for two, candles flickering, wine breathing, roses in a crystal vase that caught the light and scattered it like diamonds. "What's all this?" Mira asked. "I've been waiting." Nico pulled out her chair, waited for her to sit, then took his own seat across from her. For the right moment. For everything to settle. For you to know, beyond any doubt, that this is real. Nico. Let me finish. He took her hand across the table, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. A year ago, I was drowning. My sister was dead. My nephew was unreachable. My empire was everything I had, and it wasn't enough. It was never enough. His voice roughened. Then you walked into a ballroom and looked at a scared little boy like he mattered, like he was worth seeing. And something in me remembered what it felt like to hope. Mira's eyes stung. She didn't try to stop the tears, had learned with him that vulnerability wasn't weakness. You taught me to talk to my nephew, Nico continued, but more than that, you taught me to listen, to pay attention, to be present in ways I'd forgotten how to be. He reached into his jacket pocket and Mira's heart stopped. The box was small, black velvet, worn at the edges, an heirloom, not a purchase. When he opened it, the ring inside stole her breath. A single sapphire, deep blue as a midnight sea, surrounded by diamonds that sparkled like stars. This was my grandmother's, Nico said. She gave it to my mother the night before her wedding. My mother gave it to my sister, who kept it safe for the day she hoped I'd find someone worth giving it to. His voice cracked. I found her, Sophia. I found her. Mira was crying openly now, tears streaming down her cheeks, her hand trembling in his grip. Mira Santos. Nico rose from his chair, moved around the table and lowered himself to one knee before her. You came into my life like a storm and stayed like a sunrise. You gave me back my nephew. You gave me back myself. And I am asking you, begging you, to let me spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you. He held up the ring, his dark eyes shining with everything he'd spent a lifetime learning to hide. Will you marry me? The word came out before she could think, before she could breathe, before she could do anything but reach for him. Yes. She pulled him up, crashed into his arms, kissed him with everything she had. Yes, yes. 1,000 times. Yes. He slid the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, like it had been waiting for her all along, and held her face in his hands, his forehead pressed to hers. I love you, he whispered. I will love you until there are no words left, in any language, to describe what you mean to me. I love you too. She laughed through her tears, joy bubbling up from somewhere deep and endless. Even when you're impossible, even when you're terrifying, even when you buy me things I don't need and refuse to take no for an answer. Especially then, he agreed and kissed her again. From the doorway behind them came the sound of small hands clapping. They turned to find Leo in his pajamas, his face split by the widest grin Mira had ever seen, his hands moving in rapid celebration. Finally, I've been waiting forever. Nico laughed, a real laugh, full and warm, the kind she'd worked so hard to draw out of him. He opened his arms, and Leo ran into them, and then Mira was pulled in too, the three of them tangled together on the moonlit terrace. A family, imperfect and unexpected and more precious than anything she'd ever known. She thought of Tommy, of the brother who'd taught her that love didn't need sound to be heard. She thought of her parents, gone too soon, who'd given her a foundation of kindness she'd built her whole life upon. She thought of the girl she'd been at that gala, exhausted, invisible, certain that happiness was for other people. That girl had answered a child's silent cry for help, had stepped into a world of danger and darkness because she couldn't walk away from someone who needed her, and in doing so, she'd found everything she'd been searching for. I love you both, she signed, one arm around Leo, the other around Nico. More than I can say. Then show us. Leo signed back, his eyes bright with mischief. Every day. Forever. Nico pressed a kiss to her temple, his voice low against her ear. Forever sounds about right. Mira smiled, surrounded by the family she'd found in the most unexpected place, and let forever begin. Thank you all for following this story. If you enjoyed it, please write in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video, as your support is essential for me to continue creating content like this.